Imagine spending the night in a room where guests have fled in terror after feeling an invisible weight settle onto the bed beside them in the darkness. This is not the opening of a horror film, but the documented reality of what occurred for years at the old Ivy Inn in Charlottesville, Virginia, a historic establishment where the elegant facade of Southern hospitality concealed something far more disturbing beneath its centuries-old foundation. The building stood on the outskirts of Charlottesville, its thick stone walls and wide plank floors speaking to an era that predated the Civil War, an era built on the labor and suffering of enslaved people whose stories were never formally recorded, but whose presence seemed to linger in ways that no one could fully explain. For decades before Ed and Lorraine Warren received the call to investigate, staff members and overnight guests reported experiences that defied rational explanation. Lights flickered in rooms where electrical systems had just passed inspection. Voices and footsteps echoed through hallways confirmed to be completely empty. Most disturbing of all was the persistent sensation reported by countless individuals of being watched by something that vanished the moment you turned to confront it directly. The inn's management tried for years to dismiss these incidents as the quirks of an old building, the kind of harmless atmosphere that guests might even find charming in a historic property. But as reports accumulated and staff turnover increased, with employees refusing assignments in certain areas of the building, the decision was finally made to contact the New England Society for Psychic Research. When the case files reached Ed and Lorraine Warren in the 1980s, both investigators recognized immediately that this was not a matter to be taken lightly. The combination of the building's age, its connection to an era of documented human suffering, and the consistency of witness testimony across years and multiple unrelated individuals suggested something genuinely powerful had taken root in that place. The Warrens agreed to make the journey south, understanding that paranormal infestation recognizes no state lines or regional boundaries. The phenomena at the old Ivy Inn concentrated primarily in two distinct locations within the building. The lower level, which included the original root cellar and adjacent storage spaces, had become a place where even the most skeptical staff members experienced undeniable strangeness. Witnesses consistently described seeing a dark human-shaped form that moved along the walls before disappearing directly into solid stone and plaster. The temperature in this area would plunge suddenly and dramatically, dropping so severely that your breath would fog in front of your face, even on warm summer evenings. Thermometers confirmed what witnesses felt, recording temperature differentials that had no mechanical or seasonal explanation. The second focal point of activity was an upstairs guest room that had earned a grim reputation among the staff. Guest after guest requested room changes after spending only part of a night there, and the pattern of their experiences was disturbingly consistent. After midnight, an oppressive atmosphere would descend on the room like a suffocating blanket. Guests reported a sense of profound dread, accompanied by the sound of breathing that came from no identifiable source. Most disturbing were the multiple independent reports of a physical sensation, the feeling of weight and pressure on the bedding as though something unseen had climbed onto the bed and settled beside the terrified guest. Staff assigned to clean this particular room began experiencing their own problems. They described sudden waves of nausea and an overwhelming compulsion to leave immediately. Several employees flatly refused to enter that room alone after dark, regardless of any reassurance or incentive offered by management. When Ed and Lorraine Warren arrived at the old Ivy Inn and crossed the threshold for the first time, Lorraine's sensitivity to spiritual presence activated immediately. She later described experiencing an impression of overlapping presences within the building, some carrying qualities of sorrow and grief, others radiating agitation and unrest, and one that stood apart from the rest, distinctly cold and purposeful in its awareness that investigators had arrived. Ed Warren began his methodical examination of the property, applying both his formal training as a demonologist and the practiced intuition he had developed across decades of active fieldwork. The root cellar demanded his particular attention. Standing in that underground space, he noted that it felt substantially heavier than its physical dimensions should account for, a subjective quality he had learned to associate with locations where significant human suffering had occurred and where that suffering had never been spiritually acknowledged or addressed. Lorraine descended into the cellar and entered a light trance state, opening herself more fully to the impressions that saturated the space. What she experienced there ranked among the most emotionally overwhelming encounters of her career investigating historic southern locations. She received powerful impressions of individuals who had been confined in that underground space under conditions of terror and despair, people whose fear and anguish had soaked into the very stones. Ed Warren's professional assessment classified most of the phenomena at the Old Ivy Inn as predominantly residual in nature, meaning the psychic imprinting of historical trauma that replays itself within a structure without conscious direction or awareness, like a recording endlessly looping. However, one critical element of the activity troubled him deeply because it did not conform to the residual pattern. The dark form witnessed moving through the lower level had been reported to approach individuals directly rather than follow a fixed, unchanging path. On at least 2 documented occasions, witnesses reported that the form had paused and appeared to regard them directly before withdrawing into the wall. This purposeful reactive behavior indicated the presence of an intelligent component operating alongside the residual layer, and Ed Warren considered this distinction absolutely critical in determining the appropriate response. An intelligent presence meant something that was aware, something that had claimed territory and would resist displacement. Lorraine confirmed her husband's assessment through the impressions she received in trance, describing the coldly purposeful entity she had detected upon arrival as entirely separate from the sorrowful residual energies left by historical suffering. This intelligent presence had occupied the lower level of the building for a very long time, far longer than the inn had operated as a business, and it had grown comfortable in its possession of that space. Working in coordination with a Catholic priest from the local diocese who had been briefed on the investigation, Ed and Lorraine Warren conducted a comprehensive blessing and spiritual cleansing of the entire property. They began in the upper room, where guests had experienced the sensation of an invisible weight on their beds, and worked systematically downward through the building to conclude in the root cellar, where the most intense and concentrated activity had been documented. The blessing proceeded smoothly through the upper floors, and Lorraine reported sensing the residual presences respond to the prayers with what she characterized as a quality of release, as though the religious ceremony provided a passage or permission that had been unavailable to them for generations. The root cellar presented a different challenge entirely. Ed Warren later described a sustained period during the blessing when the temperature plummeted sharply and the priest leading the prayers faltered before gathering himself and pressing forward. Lorraine, positioned at the entrance to the cellar space, reported feeling the intelligent presence push back with considerable force, resisting the cleansing with what felt like deliberate, willful opposition. The prayers continued without pause, and after an extended sequence that felt to all participants like a spiritual confrontation, something fundamental shifted in the atmosphere of the space. Both investigators and the officiating priest registered the change simultaneously. The temperature returned to normal in an instant. The oppressive weight that had characterized the cellar since their arrival simply dissolved. The blessing was completed, and the property was formally dedicated with prayers of continued spiritual protection. The Old Ivy Inn investigation became an important case study in the Warren archives, demonstrating their commitment to travel beyond their New England base when the severity and credibility of phenomena demanded it. Ed Warren referenced the Charlottesville case repeatedly in his university lectures as a clear illustration of how historic buildings in the American South, given the particular nature of suffering embedded in their foundations, could accumulate extraordinary concentrations of both residual and intelligent paranormal energy. The case was officially documented in NESBR files as a confirmed location with layered activity successfully addressed through clergy-assisted spiritual intervention. Staff at the inn reported a dramatic reduction in unexplained phenomena following the Warren coordinated blessing, with the oppressive qualities of both the root cellar and the upstairs guest room substantially diminished. The old Ivy Inn continued its long history as a gathering place for the community, its walls retaining the character and atmosphere of their considerable age, but finally free of the persistent, unwelcome presence that had occupied its deeper spaces for far too long. Hashtags: number paranormal, number supernatural, number haunted history, number Eden Lorraine Warren, number true ghost stories, number haunted places, number demonology, number spiritual investigation, number Charlottesville, Virginia, number haunted inn, number paranormal investigation, number ghost hunting, number Warren files, number true paranormal, number haunted America. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented paranormal case files. All events reference real investigations by Ed and Lorraine Warren.